Hello everyone, I am Imran Ali, Assistant Professor, Department of MBA, Noida Institute of Engineering Technology, Greater Noida. This is lecture 15, unit 2, where I am going to identify about measuring service quality and how the servo qual model can be used to identify the service gap. So, these are the following things that I will be discussing. I will be discussing what is servo qual model. Servo qual, it is basically stand for service quality model. So, service quality model, it is being used as a tool to identify where gaps are existing. So, these identify the service quality gap to discuss why these gaps are happening. So, what are the service gap and how these services gaps can be identified. Service quality model or the servo qual model was developed by the American marketing group. It was Zethamal, Parasuruman and Barry in 1988. This servo qual method was being used to identify the gap into the services provided by the customer. Why the gap do exist? Gap exists in the quality or into the services once expectation of the customers are different and services provided by the organization are different. Gaps exist when the organizations are doing different and expectation of the customers are different. For example, the university, a particular university is providing a different course or a different curriculum for a particular course, but expectation of the industry is different or expectation of the customers are different. For example, a financial institution or a commercial bank, it is providing services in a different way, assuming this is the best way, but the expectation of the customers are different. So, at some point of time in services organization, we can identify that certain gap exists. Gap is existing, the way organization is doing its service businesses, it is not being taken by the consumer positively, or somewhere or the other customers are dissatisfied. So, the services expert like the Zethamal, Parasuruman and Barry had developed a model called servo qual model to judge or to measure where the service quality gap is existing, and this is important for the service organization, so that organization can understand where the service gap exists, where the service gap is, and understanding or after understanding this service gap, organization can take a corrective action. So, this is why the servo qual model came into existence, to understand where the quality gap it is there. So, as per the servo qual model, 5 gap do exist, and 5 gaps are those. The first gap is not knowing what customers expect. So, organization is providing its services in its own way, but customer, it is not much aware about its customer, or organization has not done enough research about the expectation of the customer. The Domino, or it is Pizza Hut, or it is KFC, or it is Subway, or it is McD, they are providing services in their own way, but they do not understand the taste and preferences of the customers has been changed. We have seen into COVID-19, especially lockdown, there were various organizations who shifted their distribution and services toward online. Earlier they were totally operating into the offline, but the time has came or the situation has arrived that they were bound to offer the services through online platform. So, as and when the customer preference has been changed, customer taste and preferences has been changed, organization need to understand, especially we will say into training, conferences and lecturing, short term courses. These training or executive development program in the coming year will be provided by online platform, unlike past which was done physically. Especially into education sector, maximum seminar and conferences were organizing physically, but in the years to come we will say maximum of these activities are going to be conducted in online platform. So, what I am trying to say, once the taste and preferences of customer changes, company need to understand this change, and company should also change their ways, their strategies, their approaches, how they have to provide their services. So, service gap 1 will exist when company is understanding something else and customers are expecting something else. So, expectation of the customer are different and expectation of the companies is something different. We can see over here, this portion it is related with the customer and this portion it is related with the company, so called marketer, and gap 1 is existing when management perception of the customer expectation. This is where management, I mean to say the company perception of the customer expectation and how it is being taken by the services or how they are being perceived by the customer. So, here there is a one reason that customers perception is different, but company's expectation or company's understanding is different. So, there is a misunderstanding, there is a mismatch between what companies is offering and what customers are expecting them. So, the gap 1 is going to exist. Next, it is about gap 2, and why gap 2 exists? It exists when wrong service quality standards. Standards are what? It is about uniformity. Service quality standard, it is about uniformity. It is the same way how service is being provided. Service standards or standardizations, it is in the interest of the organization, it is in the interest of the company that these services are need to be provided in a standard format. It will ensure that services are being provided with full of quality. It will ensure that there is no much deviation in the way how services are being provided. So, once we had to ensure that there need not to be much deviation, there need not to be much differentiation, we need to ensure that the service standard had to be ensured. We can go into MACD, we can go into any standard service organization across India are ensuring that the time we took to provide services, they need to be same, the infrastructure that are going to be provided, it need to be taking same way. So, variation need to be minimum, If in providing services there are much variation, it will distort the perception of the customer and the perception is going to be negative. Now, if we say why the gap 2 exists, gap 2 exists, it is because translation of the perception into service quality specification and management understanding of the customer expectation. So, service specification it is what? It is how customer is expecting from the company that how services are going to be provided. For example, the TCS, it is providing services, passport services, it is providing services to few educational institution, it is providing services to the few telecommunication company. So, the requirement of the company from a software company, their specification are being translated into service standard or service it is providing in the same way as being said by company. So, if it is being provided into the same way, it means some standard have been maintained. If the standardization has not been made, it means some quality gaps are going to be existing, and that is why gap 2 exists when there is no service standard, there is a much variation in the way how services are going to be provided, either by a bank or by a hospital, either a service airline or a financial technology companies or a hospital or a multiplex, any organization. So, gap 2 will not exist when our services are uniform, standardized as per the expectation of the companies who are taking our services. Gap 3, it is the service performance gap. So, gap 3, that is service performance gap, why it exists? Service delivery, pre and post contract translation of the perception into service quality expectation. So, gap 3, why it will be existing? Service performance gap, and why there is a gap in providing certain services, and why does this gap is happening? That the way we have made the promises and the way we said to the company that we will be providing our services, services are not being provided into the same way. So, once this kind of gap is going to be exist, because of this it is gap 3 do exist. Next, it is gap 4, promise do not match actual delivery. It is delivery, that is, and it is external communication to the customer. So, it is how the gap 4 exists. Why gap 4 is existing? It is because we as a organization, we as a service organization has promised much with the customer. We said we will do this, we will say we will provide quality of services, we said we will give you immediate or instant services, we will there is no waiting time into our outlet or into our premises. But once actually customer turn into, he said there is a long queue, there is a long waiting time, he had to wait for a longer span of time. So, there is a quality gap when your communication is saying something else, but actual delivery or actual delivery that is made by the company, it is something different. So, this gap, it is existing between what you have delivered, what you have given to the organization, and what you have communicated or promised with the customer. If organization want to ensure that gap 4 should not exist, organization need to be much concerned about that their communication must be designed very carefully, or they should not promises with the customer what they are not in the position to fulfill. For example, we have observed that certain organization into the cosmetic segment were promising with the customer that within few days you will become fairer, although it is not possible. So, through advertisement or through communication, company has made these promises, but once actual customer will use this product and he will come to know that he has not become fairer, his satisfaction is going to be high. That is why you have said it is Fair and Lovely and some other brand. From Fair, the word Fair has been replaced by Glow. Some racial issues were also there. So, the company, the Domino was promising with the customer within 30 minutes it is going to be reach at your doorstep. So, what if it is not going to be delivered within 30 minutes? Customer dissatisfaction is going to be highest. What I am trying to say, if service organization want to ensure that there should not be gap 4, they should not unnecessarily made promises with the customer. Otherwise, dissatisfaction is going to be highest. Next, it is about the gap 5, and the gap 5 exists, it is between the difference between customer perception and customer expectation. So, it is what the difference between the customer expectation and customer perception. It is what perception and it is about expectation. So, it is about how the gap 5 will came into existence. Gap 5 is, it is what gap 5, it is both customers are involving over here. What was the expectation of the customer before taking or consuming services, and what perception he has after consuming the services. So, before he consumed the services, his expectation was very high. This is a good organization, it is a branded organization. If I will take the services, I will be fully satisfied. But once he had started consuming the services, the actual scenario was not the same. So, the expectation was different and actual is different. So, this is where thus the difference is going to be exist. We can say it is Netflix, it is Amazon or the other organization which are into the services Hotstar and all the or the other OTT services that they are providing. They all have to say that the promises we made or pre and post perception need to be same. If much gap do exist, customers dissatisfaction it is going to be highest. So, this model which was developed as a ServoQual model help the organization to understand where there is a possibility of existing gap and how and what course of action an organization can take, so that these gap can be overcome. So, this is how the gap are going to be discussed, and there are three other things that we had to take in this model. It is word of mouth communication, how customers are speaking about good about your organization, why people are speaking positive about the services of Maruti Suzuki, I mean to say the services, or why the customers are providing positive about the MI service center. So, the how customers are speaking about you, how students are speaking about a university, these are the word of mouth communication and word of mouth quality standard. Next, it is about personal need. Your need of the individual customer should also be taken into account while we design or we are in the process of identifying the gap into our service quality processes. Next, it is about past experiences, how I have been in the past, what services I have taken from the organization, I was happy with the services. So, my experience with the organization in the past will also influence my perception, my expectation, and to some extent my satisfaction is also going to be identified to a larger extent. So, this was about 5 gap which this model had help us, or this model can help the organization to identify them. Next, the first model it is about that I also had discussed, but I am going to into detail difference between the customer expectation of the services and company understanding of these services. So, gap 1 it is there is something difference or some differences exist between the understanding of the customer and understanding of the company. So, this is why the gap 1 it is going to be existing. First, it is why this gap happened. Maybe companies have not done adequate research. I mean to say companies are not doing lot of research and development. Recently, Elon Musk, who had decided to come into India, Tesla into electrical vehicle, he has set up his unit into Bangalore this year only. He said, first we will try to understand the Indian market, we will just focus on research and development. So, every organization, either it is into manufacturing or into service organization, they need to put much efforts on research. They need to understand the need and requirement of the Indian consumers. Kellogg has came from USA and they do enough research to understand the taste and preferences of the consumer. McD again came from USA, do lot of research and how the taste and preferences of the services are there. Nokia or any mobile handset company, better it if they are doing lot of research, understanding Indian consumer, and accordingly they are making their product and providing services. So, once we are doing research, we are doing lot of R&D, then there are certain chances that there will be minimum gap between what companies are understanding and what customers expectations are from the company. So, this gap 1 is, or gap 1 exists, it is because of marketing research is very minimum, or company is not much concerned about the research. We have seen Procter and Gamble has its own research department doing lot of research throughout the day to understand the need and expectation of the customer, what change they are looking to be into their product, so that they can provide the better services or product to them. Next, it is lack of upward communication. Upward communication is what? That from the bottom or from the customer side, you are not able to communicate to the company from down to top. So, once there will be a lack of upward communication, customers will not be in the position to communicate their concern, their expectation, what they are looking from the company. So, lack of upward communication might become a reason of having gap 1. Next, it is insufficient relationship focus. Company is not doing lot of focus or concentration on customer relationship. Customer relationship needs to be not. So, every organization had to be more concerned about that they are doing CRM, customer relationship management, lot of software are coming into existence. Company had to pay a lot of time, money to understand what customers are expecting and how companies can have a better relationship with them. Next, it is about inadequate service recovery. If there is a gap or service, if it is not as per the expectation of the customer, organization has taken enough action to recover this service, so that the satisfaction need to be removed. So, these are the 4 reasons because of gap 1 is existing. Next, it is gap 2, where we have identified service design and service standard. So, there is a gap in service standard, or there is a much variation into the way how services are being provided. Now, what is service design? Service design, it is the process how services are being provided, taking from the starting to till end. How services are going to be provided. You are using services of Netflix, you are taking services of any online mobile banking or any services that you are using. So, the way you are taking, you are a big basket or grocer. So, service gap, it is what? From starting to end, the way how services is being provided. Every organization need to ensure that the process of providing services need to be very short, it need to be as per the need and it need to be suited to the need of the customer. So, we need to design, service design need to be such that it is needed toward the, it is as suited to the need of the customer. So, this is how the service design. If service design is poor or it is not as per the customer expectation, then this problem are going to exist. Next, it is absence of the customer driven standard. Our services standards are not as per the expectation of the customer expectation. We have designed our service standard differently and customers are expecting a little bit different. They are expecting more technology, they ensure online payment facility need to be provided and some other expectations could be there. So, gap it is there. Inappropriate physical evidence. Physical evidence, I mean to say, once you are taking tangible dimension, intangible dimension should also be taken carefully. The third service gap, it is the performance gap, and this gap it is what? Development, difference between development of the customer driven services standard and actual service performance by the company. So, this gap it is related what you have promised, but actual services when the company has promised, it is not different. LIC, we have taken some policy from LIC or from ICICI Prudential or from HDFC Life, but once they were giving this policy, they were saying different, but once actually we have taken our standards was very different. So, once there is a actual difference, it is because of the this gap 3 existent. It is because of the deficiency in HR policy. HR policy, how it could become a reason for gap 3? Our recruitment is not appropriate, employees are not knowing about the role they are about to give to the customer, and poor employees technology fit, employees are not in the position to use technology. Next, it is to failure of match between demand and supply, demand is different and service capacity is very different, customer not fulfilling the role, problem with the services intermediary channel, organization is facing certain conflict with the other. Next, it is the communication gap. As I told you, company need to be very carefully promise with the customer. If you made some promises with the customer, but and you are not able to fulfill, then problems are going to be happening. So, whatever promises we are making, our communication channels are making with the customer, difference between the service delivery and company's external communication. So, we need to design our communication in a way that ensure we should not promise much that we cannot fulfill. If we are making lot of promises, but we are, as a company we cannot fulfill, at the end of the day our the satisfaction of the customer is going to be different. We, as per one survey, customer dissatisfaction with Air India is very high comparative to Indigo or other airline, and the reasons what the schedule of departure and arrival, the airline do not follow much of them. There is a much variation in the differences into the departure time and the arrival time. So, if the airline is not very stick to the schedule that it has made and much differences do exist between it departure time or arrival time, communication is going to be different and dissatisfaction is going to be very high. Similarly, organization through advertisement, television, if you are making lot of promises that organization will provide this, much of the promises are being made, but company can't fulfill them, again it is going to become a cause of dissatisfaction. So, service organization had to be very careful while they are making promises with the customer. And it is gap 5, it is exist when customer expectation before taking services were different and perception after taking services or after consuming these services is different. So, once there is a difference between the expectation and the perception, this also could become a cause of dissatisfaction, and organization had to be very careful about understanding these particular differences. So, this was all about the ServoQual model, service quality model, and organization had to understand these ServoQual model to understand the 5 gap and how these 5 gap can be utilized to improve the quality of services. That is all for this. Thank you very much.